Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of the Fantastic Four. I was excited going into it, but really hesitant because historically I have not been a fan of the films. I can finally say they have done Marvel's first family justice. Because I've always believed that the Fantastic Four are very fascinating and interesting characters in the comics. If it wouldn't have been for the success of the Fantastic Four, Marvel would have folded way back in the day before we got any of our favorite superheroes. They are what established Marvel's identity. They were the first superheroes with problems. There are so many things about Fantastic Four that really embody Marvel and set itself apart from DC and everybody else out there. But for some reason, when it comes to their adaptation in film, it just hasn't worked. And although I believe they're all great characters, they have really great superpowers that look good inside the panels. Whenever you put that into the big screen, I just feel like it's hard to make that look just not completely childish. But here they finally got their character designs right. The special effects in this movie were great. I think Marvel finally listened to all the people online saying that the special effects have been trash for the last 2 to 3 years. They look great. There are moments where you're like, oh man, that looks a little bit sus, but I still don't believe it was enough to take you out of it because all the characters felt like it was the Silver Age comics coming to life. And that was something that really made me excited about this movie. It felt to me like one of the best comic book adaptations. It felt like I was watching that Silver Age on the silver screen. And that is what brought me the most enjoyment because being somebody who has read the comics and has been fascinated with these stories and these characters for so long, to finally have that vision that I've had just reading them with my eyes, finally seeing them in live action on the big screen, I think that was exciting for me just so that other people could finally see why people love these characters so much. And it was almost like erasing a lot of that history of these movies being so bad because the costumes looked fantastic, not just the best the Fantastic Four have ever looked, but I think quite possibly the best superhero suits that we've had in the last 10 years because there's no nanotechnology. They don't hit a button and suddenly they're in their suit. These suits have texture, these suits have style, they have bright and vibrant color. They fit them so perfectly and they look so good on the screen, especially in IMAX, which I was so glad we went to see this movie in IMAX because I think seeing it on the biggest screen possible allowed me to enter that world. And there were so many moments that I was just engulfed in the story simply due to the fact that I was watching it on the biggest screen possible in IMAX format, especially the moments with Galactus where he takes up the entire screen. That was just my favorite part of the entire experience, that I got to see every little detail come to life. And it made Galactus feel like that much more of a threat. When you see him taking up an entire just wall in front of you, you feel that threat. And you see that contrast between these characters of how huge Galactus is and how small the Fantastic Four feel in comparison. And for that reason, for the entire movie, I was worried for them. And for the entire movie, I was thinking, like, how are they going to even have a shot at this guy? I will say that did lead me to my biggest criticism with this movie is I never felt like all of them had the perfect chemistry throughout because all individually they were really good. Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, I got the sense that he was playing a really smart character. I understood the complexity of him wanting to do the right thing and save the world and working through every scenario in his brain. I think I identified a lot with this character. Not saying that I'm as smart as him. I'm not smart whatsoever, but I could understand him being so logical and thinking things through much more like an equation and taking the emotion out of it. I really felt that in his character, and I think that is something that is taken from the comics and put onto the screen to develop this character. So I love that. Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm, I think she stole the show. I think this was her movie. She was the most just emotionally driven throughout. It starts with her finding out that she is pregnant, and it's a lot of Reed Richards' reaction to that, but her just kind of being the boss and dominating throughout this entire movie was my favorite. Joseph Quinn as a much different Johnny Storm, where the Chris Evans version was just a hothead, just wanted to hook up with chicks and be famous. This was so much more sophisticated. Joseph Quinn also looked so unique on screen, where he just had this look to him. The color in his eyes and when he was engulfed in flames looked perfect, which I think they got that CGI down just so well because it looked believable. Aside from Sue Storm, I just love the Thing. Any big Marvel character, I'm just a huge fan of. That's why I'd put the Incredible Hulk in my top 5. Ebon Moss-Bachrach, obviously I loved him from The Bear, but seeing him really take a different approach to the Thing to make him feel very lovable and soft and very comedic, I thought that was the perfect way to capture the essence of the Thing. Because in the first movie from 2005, he very much feels trapped in his body, like he's a freak, loses the love of his life. But here he is so accepting of it. And he's like, yeah, I'm the Thing. He embraces it. Yes, he does get a little bit annoyed by some of the public reaction as we see him struggle with people wanting him to say his catchphrase, it's clobbering time. So he obviously has some struggles here. He is trying to form relationships outside of being a superhero. But I love seeing him actually enjoy certain parts of it, whether it's entertaining the kids on the street who are a huge fan of him. And obviously, they are 4 years into being the Fantastic Four here. So maybe he's taking some time to deal with it after coming back from space and turning into the Thing and having your entire life just completely changed and you can't go back to how you were. Which, that was another thing I did enjoy is they didn't do an origin story here, which I think is something not only Marvel is doing, but all superhero movies right now saying, we don't need to do origin stories. People know these characters. I do think some people are a little bit less familiar with the Fantastic Four. So they did kind of condense it at the very beginning because they go on a talk show and they use that talk show as a way to tell you how they got their superpowers for maybe anybody who didn't see the 2015 version, doesn't remember the 2005 version, or just has no idea about these characters, which I think is something Marvel is also showing us now, is that maybe all these movies aren't going to connect as much, and they are going for quality over quantity, given that this movie is kicking off a new phase in the MCU. You could just go into this movie, not have seen any Avengers movies, not have seen any Marvel movie whatsoever, and you would understand it completely. While it is obviously building to Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, I just felt like for the first time, it felt like this was a completely self-contained movie. Even though I love Thunderbolts, that was still connected in all the remnants of the MCU and that was closing out that chapter. But it just felt refreshing to me, much like Superman did a few weeks ago, that we can have superhero stories like this that stand alone, that establish themselves, that don't need to rely on what now feels like MCU gimmicks. There wasn't even, I feel, the biggest emphasis on the post-credit scenes. So I think Marvel is listening to what people have been saying about them for the last few years, that we just want good, solid, standalone stories, good-looking characters, great comic book action, and that is what we got with the Fantastic Four. Now, where it ranks on all the Marvel movies I've seen lately, it is really good. There's very few things I can say that I didn't like about it. That being said, I still didn't completely love it because it looked good. It went by really quickly. It clocked in right around an hour and 44 minutes. You end up hitting that 1 hour and 55 minutes if you stay for the post-credit scene, and then there's a second post-credit scene. But it went by really quickly. About the hour mark, I was like, I don't want this movie to end. And by the time it did end, I was wanting more. And I felt that I kind of held that against the movie because they were able to give us a bunch of interesting characters that I just wanted to see more of. And aside from just our superheroes, I was really invested in both of these villains, which is something that excites me as well, as Marvel has just had historically forgettable villains, and I wanted to see more of them fighting, and I don't think this movie had enough of that. I think they were really trying to establish this family story and really shape them into the superhero family that we need to carry on into the Avengers, where I wanted them to prove a little bit more why they deserve our trust, why I feel safe with them. And that goes back to what I was saying, is I never really felt them fully become a team in this movie. Even though they were all great individual characters, I still think they need to mesh together a little bit better. I feel the fact that I'm also coming off of Superman, which I think was just on another level. And I know it's not the same world, it's not the same universe, but it is the same genre of superhero movies. And I just think the fun was captured a little bit more in Superman. And it's kind of weird that both of these movies have similar aesthetics, even though Superman is set in modern day. They almost feel like twin films to me, which is something that Marvel and DC have gone back and forth on in their history, where in Superman, everything was related to the number three, 3 years, 3 minutes. Here, everything was related to four. I don't know if that was on purpose, of it being 4 years later, the Fantastic Four. That could just be a strange coincidence. But being the fact that they both came out in July and they are both from the two biggest superhero studios, I just kind of feel like maybe they both knew what they were dealing with. Maybe DC was trying to beat Fantastic Four to the punch. And in this case, I kind of think they did. Because after I watched Superman, I was like, oh man, I don't know how Fantastic Four is going to compete with that. So maybe that influenced my score a little bit. If this would have came out at a different time of the year, if it had taken the Thunderbolt slot, maybe I would have rated it a little bit higher. This movie had a lot going for it. It's good. It could have been great. It could have been even more fantastic. Really has me excited for the MCU overall moving forward into Doomsday, into Spider-Man. Oh, I can't wait. I am so in right now. Once we get to Secret Wars, it's just I'm probably gonna explode. So maybe I'm holding my higher scores for those movies. Before the Fantastic Four First Steps, I give it 4 out of 5 clobbering times.